I'm Edward October, and this is A Nefarious Nightmare. This podcast contains foul language and discussions of violence. Additional trigger warnings will be posted as needed in the show notes. Listener discretion is advised.
On a chilly day in Pekin, Illinois, in November of 2016, Robert, or Bonzai, B, went missing. Nearly a year later, evidence and remains were found consistent with the boy. This case will be confusing, heartbreaking, frustrating, infuriating. Another story of a kid who never stood a chance.
His mom, Lisa, would be known as someone who couldn't keep her story straight, which added to the speculation of her involvement. As a reminder, all parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty. But with this episode, we will be diving into what so many have had to say, as this case remains cold today. With that, I'm Courtney Fenner.
And I'm Amanda Cronin, and A Nefarious Nightmare presents Justice for Bonzai, The Tragedy of Robert B.
Before we get into this, I want to let you all know that Robert and Bonzai will be used interchangeably. While we do not have a clear idea as to why he was nicknamed Bonzai, I researched a few things. A bonsai tree requires the equivalent of extra care and also almost no care, kind of like a succulent. You have to prune a bonsai tree to keep it thriving and also at its notably small stature. A bonsai tree is unique and full of mystery. And when you type into Google, what is so special about a bonsai tree? You get this answer. It has been around for well over 1,000 years. The ultimate goal of growing a bonsai is to create a miniaturized but realistic representation of nature in the form of a tree. And I think it reminds me of a phoenix, where in mythology, it's a bird that represents birth, death, and rebirth, or from what research says, an immortal bird associated with Greek mythology that cyclically regenerates or is otherwise born again. Associated with the sun, a phoenix obtains new life by rising from the ashes of its predecessor. Bonsai is translated from Japanese to mean literally planted in a container, or can be used as a battle cry, or even a patriotic cry or joyous shout. One translation also roughly points to, "Yay, we did it," while another says, "May we live forever," much like a phoenix. I found all of this interesting based off of Robert B's short life and how he was, and found that in the end, it was a fitting nickname. He was planted, meant to thrive, but he wasn't well cared for, but he truly was meant to live forever, like a phoenix or a bonsai. And maybe, just maybe, through this story, and others like it, he will.
Another thing to mention is when we started the Bee movement, after our Minding the Beehive series, all victims and survivors are bees, especially those who are both resilient and vulnerable. Robert B was not only both resilient and vulnerable, but how fitting is it that his last name goes with our movement?
I want to read you part of the chat we had with Erica Bennett, who was actually also covering the case of Robert B on her TikTok. I reached her for comment, and she had a lot to say, and it's all spaced out throughout the episode, but right here she says, quote, "I never had the pleasure of meeting Robert, but being from his hometown as well, I have come to learn a lot about Robert and what he was like. He had a hard life. His mom wasn't really a mother to him. She didn't seem to care. He got himself in trouble a lot and was missing a lot of school. He had truancy after him a lot. His mother was, and maybe still is, dating a man that was also not very nice to Robert. I've learned that he was a very outgoing kid, smiled a lot, and was always running with friends. I grew up on the same side of town as this kid. I actually lived a block from him at one point, and I'm sure that he was one of the kids I saw running around the neighborhood. This case hits close to home for me because I grew up there and I am a mother. I check on the case every so often, but there has been nothing new for a very, very long time. Almost as if they just stopped trying to get him justice." End quote.
Robert B., or as everyone knew him, Bonzai, was born September 5th, 2003 in Peoria, Illinois. He was described as a goofy, sweet, and outgoing kid. Despite growing up in a destitute area, his family had suffered financially, like many in the area, and everyone was doing anything they could to make ends meet. His upbringing was rough, but again, he made the best out of it. In fact, Erica, who Courtney spoke to, has talked openly about his case on TikTok. She said, quote, "He was a kid that needed more love, but he played outside a lot from what I've gathered and had friends. He just hated school and apparently hated home," end quote. She also goes on to say that he did have truancy after him a lot and, quote, "I never had the pleasure of meeting Robert, but being from his hometown as well as I have come to learn a lot about Robert and what he was like," end quote.
Our friend Sonia Cohen, who is not only a huge fan of this podcast, but also really stepped up to help us with the research of this case, found more information. Moving forward, please note that she was instrumental in this research. So thank you so much, Sonia, for your help with this. You're truly a lifesaver here. To describe Robert further, Sonia goes on to mention, quote, "Robert liked to fish, was a diehard Chicago Bears fan, and played football with his local team. He was said to have a smile that lit up a room and was always kind despite what he had gone through in his short life," end quote. She also goes on to tell us that he was an epileptic and needed to keep his medication with him as well as also having ADHD. This is one important factor to remember for later. He was described as rambunctious and troubled, skipped school a lot, often argued with his mom, and he had run away at least once before, but speculation of it being more than once. She spoke with a local community member that said, quote, "The whole situation was a clusterfuck, and it was obvious his mom didn't care," end quote.
The Department of Child and Family Services had knowledge of Robert and his situation as he had often had truancy officers making house calls. He did have a felony because of truancy, and one truancy officer did arrive at Robert's home to find out why he hadn't been showing up to school. When the officer arrived, Robert wasn't complying with the officer and then ran out of the house to get away. This seemed to have been the norm. It was quite normal for Bonzai to be absent from school, and he was no stranger to the police in town. And when he'd run off, he would usually pop up later by coming home or calling from a friend's house. But in November of 2016, things were different. He just never showed back up.
To give you a further look into Bonzai's home life, there were hundreds of DCFS calls and nothing was done. We hear about this happening too often. It was rumored that the stepfather, Lisa's boyfriend, was abusive. The house looked like a hoarder's house. Robert slept on a plastic cot as long as no one else was passed out there. No family pictures were around, and it was very dirty and unsafe. Stephanie, who was Bonzai's older sister, tried to keep taking him when foster care stepped in, but he kept being brought back to Lisa because she did parenting classes. She said that Bonzai admitted to her that Lisa let him smoke dope and drink, and that Lisa would take his prescription drugs. Bonzai would often stay with Stephanie, and she said she found it wild that Lisa made the missing report and even did a news interview on TV before calling Stephanie and asking if Bonzai was there. She didn't even check with his father, who was in the nursing home at the time, before making the report earlier. This is a case of a boy who was failed by the system. He should not have been in the environment that he was.
A document was found that Lisa had filed for an order of protection against her former boyfriend on September 30th of 2016, just weeks before Bonzai's disappearance. In the document, it's quoted that she fears for her safety and the safety of her son. It mentions that he would park and try to get her son to come to his vehicle. Quote, "He was outside my bedroom window and he was hollering through the bedroom window that I could run, but I couldn't hide," end quote, Lisa had said. When asked if she believed he was capable of killing Bonzai, she stated, quote, "He was capable of anything," end quote. So why wasn't anything done? A month later, after Bonzai went missing, the order of protection was denied.
Hannah, a friend of Bonzai, said that one time they were all hanging out at the park and Robert was there with Lisa. Bonzai told Hannah in front of Lisa that his mom let him smoke dope and take drugs when he wanted to. Hannah said that Lisa just stayed quiet and never denied it or said anything to Bonzai for telling her that.
Robert, at the time of his disappearance, was described as 4'6", 110 pounds, and had last been seen wearing a red and gray sweater with jeans and red Nikes. It's been said that his mother gave conflicting reports as to her son's whereabouts the night prior. So, the official date of disappearance made by the Pekin police would be November 17th, 2016, even though his mother said he returned home later that day. Bear with us, it gets really confusing because his official reported missing date was a day later.
There's many terms to describe a mother, and I'm not going to go into that here, so I'll just kind of give all of them, but, Bonzai's mother or legal guardian or birth giver, whatever you want to call her, but Lisa, she describes him as full of life, energetic, and got along with everybody. There wasn't a person he didn't get along with, and he liked to hang out with kids who were way older than him, like 16 and 18-year-olds. She said they were putting things in his head that they shouldn't have, and she didn't know how to handle that and really wasn't aware of all of that until it was too late. She did see him one day smoking weed with an older kid while she was on her way home from the grocery store one time, and she said that she pulled over and made him come home with her and got onto him for his actions. And I personally do not believe that she even reprimanded him for doing drugs because, you'll find out. But several people state that she provided him with drugs and often did them with him, sadly. But she also stated in the interview that, quote, he was an independent soul, but always went everywhere with me. Never ran off without letting me know. He'd tell me he was going somewhere, but then go somewhere else. Now, listening to that, she absolutely contradicted herself. That's why we keep saying, according to Lisa, or Lisa stated throughout this story, because we don't fully believe everything she says. But it is part of the story, so we're going to cover it.
According to Lisa, the following is the timeline leading up to Bonzai's disappearance. Please take into consideration that she has not been the most truthful or consistent person, but most of this is following a timeline that has been loosely confirmed in some way or another. Lisa states that Bonzai stayed at his friend Christopher Butt's house on the 16th and the 17th. Lisa stayed in Peoria with some friends on the 16th, and she said she talked to Bonzai that night and on the 17th.
Lisa then states that she was staying at Patty Adams' house with some friends. To give you all Patty Adams' side of the story now, she states that the very first time she ever met Lisa was on November 16th and had never met or seen her before that day. She had never met Bonzai. Patty says that there were only about 5 people at her home that day. Lisa says that she was at a party there. Lisa was invited by Patty's nephew, Mike Donahoe. Patty does confirm that Lisa was there on the 16th and then came back on the 17th around 6 p.m., where she had dinner and drank and then left at around 3 p.m. on the 18th that following Friday.
But to get back to the timeline, according to Lisa, on the 16th, she got a call from the truancy officer after they chased Bonzai that morning, but lost him. So then Lisa called the Butts house where he was spending the night, and they said that they did watch him walk to the bus stop. The following is a quote from Christopher's mother, Teresa. Quote, "Yes, Robert stayed at my house for 2 nights and got up with my son and was supposed to go to school, but didn't. My son went to school. I didn't even know that Robert didn't go to school on Thursday until the police showed up to my house looking for him. He apparently ran from them, came back here, and I told him if they came back here looking for him, I wasn't going to lie for him. Then Lisa called me that night and said he could stay again if he wanted to, and he did. Then him and my son got up on Friday morning to go to school, and my son went to his bus stop and Robert left to go to his. And I again didn't know that he didn't go to school until the police showed up and the truancy officer came to my door. I called Lisa and told her, and she said that she was on her way home and that they told me that they would tell her to meet them back at her house, and that was the last time I seen Robert. And the police have been back here and asked the same questions and searched my home, and they haven't been back since. So I don't know what people are saying, but I don't know anything else about him." End quote.
Lisa got a call from Peter on the 17th that Bonzai was with him, and she asked Peter to take him back to the Butts house. She called the residence and confirmed he was there, and Lisa asked Mrs. Butt to not let him leave until she got home. So she got home at around 3 p.m. and asked him to come home, and he did. When she asked him why he didn't go to school, he told her because he didn't want to. She said that Bonzai asked if he could go back to the Butts house that night, and Lisa agreed as long as he promised to go to school the next day. She called to make sure that he got there okay, and he did stay there the night of the 17th. He did call her the night of the 17th and asked Lisa to bring him a pack of smokes, and when she told him that she couldn't, she said that he cussed her out and hung up on her. But according to Lisa, he called back 5 minutes later and apologized, and they told each other good night.
On the morning of the 18th, Lisa got another call from the truancy officer and was notified that Bonzai was not in school again. Lisa says that she called the Butts and they said that they watched him walk to his bus stop. The bus stop was about 5 blocks away from the Butts house. According to Lisa, she found out weeks later that Bonzai had tried to get on the bus that day, but the driver refused to let him on because he had dropped a drink on himself that he wasn't supposed to have.
Okay, I could be absolutely wrong here, but from what I've been reading and seeing, it's likely that the drink that he wasn't supposed to have was an alcoholic beverage. I mean, again, I could be absolutely wrong on that, so don't quote me on that, but that's what my mind goes to. But anyway, according to an anonymous student, a classmate of Bonzai's states that on the 18th, she saw Bonzai standing between 2 schools at 7:20 and 7:30 a.m. When her mom picked her up after school, her mom told her that they were going to go help search for Bonzai. She never saw him in the school, but she did see him by the school. Police ended the search after a few hours and told everyone to stop searching.
Lisa also states that the only way you can lock the front door to their house was from the inside, and when she arrived home around 3 p.m. on the 18th, it was unlocked, meaning no one was home. But when she had spoken to the officers looking for Bonzai just a little bit earlier, they stated that the front door was locked, so she assumed Bonzai was in there hiding from them. When she got home, she said that she noticed that his clothes were there that he had taken to the Butts the night before. Mail was scattered around like someone had gone through it, and there was a spoon in the peanut butter jar that was left open and half eaten. Robert was also epileptic and diagnosed with ADHD, which he took medication for both of them, but he did not have his medication or his cell phone with him when he left.
Being gone and not checking in was a frequent thing for Bonzai. Typically, he would return the next day, though. This time was different. He didn't return and no one, not even friends, knew where he had gone. Since the local law enforcement knew of Robert from previous encounters, when his mother reported him missing on the 18th of November, law enforcement listed him as an endangered runaway, listed being last seen on the 17th due to conflicting stories about his last whereabouts. They didn't have any reason to believe he was more than a runaway.
Robert's mother was evicted from her home in March of 2017, but had moved in February according to a video she had made. She claimed that she was moving to a rehab facility, but there was no confirmation of her being in the facility. When asked about what would happen if Bonzai returned home to see the house was vacant, his mother replied, quote, "My number has changed. He knows how to get a hold of my old neighbor and the police department. They have my new number. I got kicked out of the house." End quote. On March 8th of 2017, Bonzai's father, Robert Sr., passed away. He was sick and living in an assisted living facility. Kira, Bonzai's niece technically, said that in an interview as well that Lisa was not willing to go out and search for him, stating that she just would stay in the house and wait there. Stephanie and Kira said that they forced her to come check out leads with them. I know this part to be fact because it is mentioned by several people throughout this case.
I'm sure you all have gathered here that she's acting really flippant and careless. And I'm just going to go on record and say I agree. I'm pretty infuriated by it also. But anyway, It does need to be on record that Robert Sr. was blind and elderly, so that is why he was in an assisted living facility. Someone from his dad's facility said that Bonzai would ride his bike over 15 miles to go visit his dad in the facility and on occasion would spend the night. Usually the police would come to the facility to find Bonzai because Lisa would call them and say he was missing or had run away, which again contradicts what Lisa has said in the interviews.
Then, on July 24th, 2017, Bonzai's remains were discovered on and around property owned by a family friend, or who would be rumored to be Lisa's ex. More on that later. He was mowing his lawn and said that the remains weren't there a few weeks prior. When the investigators responded to the scene, they found more of his remains scattered, and this was just a couple of miles away from home. With all of this, they were able to complete a full skeleton consistent with a 13-year-old male. Chief Deputy Jeff Lauer believed that these remains had been moved by animals in the area. The area where he was found is on the edge of town, close to houses and the downtown. It's easy to walk to and to get to the railroad tracks as well. Now, where he was actually found mostly was like in a dense wooded area, according to Ash from Ashes to Ash, where she investigates Bonzai's case in depth. You should go watch it on YouTube. Ash states that it would not be easy to carry a body through where he was found. When she got there, there were still about 25 evidence markers in a 15-foot diameter area. It was about 50 feet away from the railroad tracks. Now, there was easy access to the spot he was found through a private home's backyard chain link fence that backed up to the dense wooded area that I mentioned earlier, and it did have a gate to go through.
About 2 days later, Tazewell County Coroner Dr. Jeff Baldy confirmed that the remains did belong to Robert B. via dental records. Then in September, nearly a year after he disappeared, familial DNA from his mother and then father linked the remains to them. The DNA testing was considered to be complicated because they needed 2 samples. The reason it took some time to get DNA testing done was because his father passed away 6 months prior, and they needed a better sampling of his dad's DNA. Dr. Baldy was unable to determine how long Robert had been deceased.
Dr. Baldy officially ruled Robert's death as a homicide on October 10th, issuing a death certificate to his mother so that the family could obtain some closure and celebrate his short life. She then published an obituary claiming that he was pronounced dead at 3:15 p.m. on Monday, July 25th of 2017. The memorial was held on October 14th. With that, the closure was far from over. There has not been an official cause of death determination, only that it was ruled a homicide. So his remains were turned over to the Pekin Police Department, where it remained under their investigation. In regards to his remains, Billy Inglis, which is a Pekin police officer, said, quote, "Any evidence is still in custody. The matter is still under investigation," end quote. Inglis never confirmed it if there are any suspects connected to this case.
It's been mentioned that Robert's mother's response to his disappearance was, quote, highly unusual. She wouldn't respond to the media when they questioned her about his disappearance. She would make claims that she had been in the quote-unquote crazy ward, and this part isn't clear since the screenshot had been shared on Facebook, but not long after his disappearance, she did put in a Facebook post that was later deleted, offering to babysit for $10, simply saying, quote, "I do babysitting in my place. I provide hot meals," end quote. It's unclear as to the legitimacy of this, but the comments are a concern since so many people expressed outrage and disbelief, and also warned others not to take on this ad. And even I, looking at it, found it odd because who in the fuck would run to Facebook offering to babysit when your own son is missing? I mean, I just don't fucking get it.
Her reputation isn't the best. I want to put that out there right now. Many people have come forward about Lisa, most of the things not said in the most positive light. This includes people who have suggested we cover this case. Those who knew her and those who have followed this case very closely. The following is an example of statements made about her character as well as a deeper look into the home life.
An anonymous DCFS worker mentions that kids are supposed to be taken away from the home if the home is messy, has no water, unsanitary conditions, no food, or they can't sleep in the bed. The investigator sometimes will give the parent time to get the house cleaned up before he actually removes the child. Lisa claims that DCFS came only one time. Quote, "They did one time, and we had to clean the house before we could move back in, and they had condemned our house, and we stayed with the lady on the corner for a little while. I cleaned the whole house, and I got it all spick and span so we could go back to our own home." End quote. When asked what she thought about her own behavior and how the house was kept, she said, quote, "I feel bad because with me not being able to control Bonzai, he was so out of hand. He would throw shit all over the house and wouldn't pick up. When I asked him to go pick something up, nope, I want to hit mom today. And I'd call my husband and tell him he's out of control and I don't know what to do. And he'd tell me just take stuff away from him." End quote. See, this part just tells me that she is the type to deflect any blame onto her son, who is an extension of herself, because perhaps she's a narcissist. But what do we know? What do we know?
According to her neighbor, James Smith, he knew Lisa from just around the neighborhood. He said, quote, "The day DCFS was on her case big time because of the condition of her house, which, like I said, we should have never got involved, which is, they needed a place to stay while she cleaned up the house. She didn't get to clean up the house, then she'd lose Bonzai. I felt sorry for the kid, so I said, all right. 4 days after he leaves our house, he's reported missing." End quote. Bonzai stayed with them from the 10th to the 13th. Lisa claims that her ex-boyfriend was stalking her, so this neighbor, James, went over there, and the house was completely unlivable.
An anonymous friend of Bonzai's states that they stayed at Bonzai's a lot because, quote, "That's the house where you can get the drugs." End quote. They said you couldn't even get a spoon because the sink would be so piled up with dirty dishes that you couldn't even wash a dish to use it. They'd go home to shower and eat and then go right back over there for more drugs. They also stayed on a broken futon and remembers mice crawling over them while sleeping. Robert would sleep in Lisa's room, usually on a pile of clothes. They never saw them go to a laundromat, and they didn't have a washer or dryer. They go on to say, quote, "He was a mommy's boy for some reason," end quote.
Stephanie noted that the landlord let Lisa stay in that house for free because Robert was missing. Looking at this, as well as the babysitting post, all leads me to believe that she was milking his disappearance to glean sympathy and freebies. But I don't want to give a definitive opinion on that one, even though this case really seems to not be helping her character at all at this point. And Patty and her nephew both have taken polygraphs and both passed. She said Lisa seemed fine, like nothing was wrong on the 16th or the 17th. Nothing stuck out. Patty also says that Lisa didn't even remember she was at Patty's house until after the fact, after Bonzai was missing.
At this point, you're all figuring out that her character isn't the greatest. She also has several stories and not one of them match up. Now, there was a message received by somebody on Facebook from Lisa, and it does say, and I'm going to try my best to read it because it makes absolutely no sense, but, quote, "I will tell you why, because you don't hang out with child molesters and sex offenders of people who are related to child molesters and sex offenders and say you do not know anything. You do realize that my son and your bubby suffered the most painful murder. He was suffocated to death. Somebody wrapped a rope around his neck and chalked him," she meant to say choked him, "with it as they watched him take his last breath." End quote. I mean, it makes no sense, but it's oddly specific.
Michael Kruger, a friend from the psych ward, and Lisa were friends a couple of months after Bonzai goes missing. He says that Lisa asked his mom if she could stay with them, and his mom said no. So she walked over to his dad after that and asked him if she could stay with them. So she moved in with them.
Dustin, who is another friend of Lisa's after Bonzai, goes on to say, while really messed up one day, he claimed that she said that if she had never gotten that call from her ex-boyfriend, that she wouldn't be in this whole mess. She had said that he told her on the phone when she was on her way to Peoria that the two of them and Bonzai were roughhousing and something went wrong, that she needed to come help hide the body. The day they found his body before they got the dental confirmation, she seemed like she was acting, which has already been established that she is melodramatic. Anyway, after the dental records came back, he said she just shrugged, like she knew already. She was very flippant about it. Lisa has gone on record and said Michael and Dustin both were lying.
Michael's mother asked Lisa point blank, quote, "Did you and him get into an argument and something happened?" End quote. Lisa said no, that she could never punish him. She didn't seem sad or have any remorse during that conversation. Stephanie was told first about Bonzai being found, not Lisa. Lisa didn't want to go to Pekin after he was found. She just wanted to stay with her friends. Michael also had said that Lisa didn't call the police after the roughhousing call because she didn't know if it was a serious call or not. He told the police all of this. Michael then says that when she got the phone call saying that they did find his body, she wasn't even upset. She asked a friend to take her to the store to get a cherry Pepsi, chips, and some dip. Are you fucking serious?
According to a text from Patty Adams, quote, "They all used me as an alibi to cover their tracks. That's what they did," end quote. Someone responded with, "Cover up what tracks?" Patty responded, "Of murdering Robert. That's what tracks." Lisa also says that Patty's daughter told her that Bonzai showed up there at Patty's the night of the 17th, but Lisa claims she passed out and was, quote, out cold. She said they drank more than 10 bottles of alcohol between the 5 of them, but she claims that a person that cannot be named throat punched Bonzai, and that's what killed him. That is what Lisa, quote unquote, believes happened. Lisa says that the morning of the 18th seemed totally normal there. The only thing that was off was that she couldn't find her keys because Mike Donahoe had a friend there and he had her car keys and she didn't get them back until 2 p.m. That is when she left to go back home because she had gotten that call that Bonzai was not at school again and that the officers were at her house waiting for her.
In another interview, she said that Bonzai was at her house midday because of the door being locked from the inside. I want you all to note this. So apparently, the Butts are lying, the bow hunter's lying, the anonymous student that we'll hear from later is lying, the bus driver was lying, Lisa herself was lying, the truancy officer, principal, all lying? No, she's freaking nuts. Lisa said that the bones were moved there where they found him and that he was not killed there. From what the coroner told her, she thinks that there were multiple people involved in his murder, not just 1 or 2 people.
When Stephanie had him, she had him in a private school, on a basketball team, doing fundraisers, bathed every night, fed, new clothes, a swimming pool, a schedule, and a routine. He did this for about a year, but Stephanie says that when Bonzai would live with her, then Lisa would not get enough state aid and would want him back because the only way for her to get the state aid is when Bonzai was actually living under her roof. So she'd make him come back and live with her, and Stephanie even paid for Lisa's water bill most of the time.
His babysitter, Tara Maldonado, says that DCFS never came to that house that Lisa and Bonzai were living in, and also says that Lisa's first son got taken away from Lisa by DCFS. But Bonzai was not. Tara also went on the record to say that she was extremely upset how this case was handled. There was no Amber Alert or panic about Bonzai. Police state that he did not meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. But Tara says that the cops did not do their jobs. They didn't look. They told the public not to look because it would hinder their investigation. The cops also state that they didn't have enough financial support to have an official search for Bonzai. Tara said that her and the other mothers in the neighborhood had search parties looking for him, but never once saw Lisa helping the search or even seem interested in finding him, other than on the cameras. Brooke Husky, who was an original searcher, said that they walked for 5 or 6 hours in the area that first day, where he was later found, and no one saw anything. She remembers it being so hot and people from the community just kept showing up and helping to look.
Another reason the local police didn't want people out searching was because it was deer hunting season and they didn't want anyone to get hurt or shot out in the dense wooded area, which was understandable. So everyone who searched wore bright yellow, orange, pink colors to be easily seen. A post from the police stated, quote, "We know that there are many people who want to help and organize search parties. We want to acknowledge their eagerness to help, but we ask that they hold off for now while we continue to search and interview people and leads." Obviously, the community ignored that and just organized search parties themselves without the police department's help. There were several Facebook pages coordinating the different search parties and areas to be searched. Trucks for Kids, a private organization, was the first to organize a search party alongside community members who called themselves Team Bonzai.
During the search, and off an anonymous tip, a red tote was found. The contents of this tote included some unknown items as well as teeth, a jawbone, and it's been speculated that Robert was kept in there by someone and then later relocated the body. Then, seemingly out of the blue, a skull showed up in the backyard. Again, it's speculated that perhaps someone was trying to lead someone else to where the body was found. The red tote itself was found around 1 or 2 days before his skeletal remains were discovered. There was a 6-foot fence between the evidence and the tote, which suggested that he had indeed been moved.
Lisa did go on record during an interview and say that the police told her not to look for Bonzai and not to go knock on doors to look for him. She also said that she tried to get a helicopter to go look for him, but they told her she could not do that. Terry Rice, a neighbor, said that, quote, "People that were doing good things by going out and trying to find him, but I do believe that there was some bad people that was also causing more harm than good," end quote. She also stated, like many others, that Lisa wouldn't go out looking for him, so that is really when other mothers took it upon themselves to go searching.
Ash from Ashes to Ash had an anonymous tip come in from a bow hunter that I had mentioned earlier in my rants, and he states that he saw Bonzai a few days after he was reported missing on the railroad tracks. Cops apparently were told, but they didn't do anything and didn't follow up with him until January of 2017. But still, not much was looked into. This guy could have been the last person to see Bonzai, but he was never questioned or even a suspect. Why? So many whys in this case.
Stephanie said that there is yet no marker or gravesite for Robert. Quote, "His body has not been released. His little body is being held for evidence," end quote. By the way, just to give a little background on Stephanie, that's Bonzai's older half-sister, and she said that Bonzai has admitted to her that Lisa let him smoke dope and drink and that Lisa would take his prescription drugs. Bonzai would often stay with Stephanie, and she said she found it wild that Lisa made the missing report and even did a news interview on TV before calling Stephanie and asking if Bonzai was there. She didn't even check with his father, who was in the nursing home at the time, before making the report either. But yeah, Stephanie was not only Bonzai's older sister, but she was also older than Bonzai's mother, Lisa. Stephanie also has a daughter, Kira, who is Bonzai's age, so they were raised more like brother and sister rather than uncle and niece. Kira is quoted saying, quote, "He always begged to stay with us and didn't want to go home to Lisa," end quote. Kira said that Bonzai was always at their house.
During an interview, Stephanie goes on to mention that she forced Lisa to go to a Walgreens nearby that had video footage of a little boy that matched the description of Bonzai. Lisa did not really want to leave the house and was pretty much refusing to go, but she did because she needed to identify whether or not it was him. Stephanie and her son both note after watching that it's definitely not Bonzai, but Lisa turns it around with complete melodrama, saying things to the tune of, "Oh, my angel, someone has taken him away. He's already gone and someone kidnapped him." We have discussed narcissism before, and I don't want to diagnose, as I'm no doctor or therapist, but narcissists tend to keep a situation, any situation, and triangulate back on themselves in order to glean sympathy.
Stephanie then tried to reassure Lisa by saying that it doesn't look like Robert, and then it was mentioned that a police officer pulled her aside asking, quote, "What did she do?" end quote. So it was all very suspicious. An anonymous user on Reddit claims, quote, I know all about this. I was a friend, and if you're from Pekin, you know who killed 2 people and never had anything happen. I grew up on Cooper Street on the south side, and I remember Ricky, Dustin, and now Robert. I'm sure I have a pretty good idea what happened to the boy. Last I heard, he was in a bad spot in life, and he was never a good kid. His whole family was a bit chainsaw massacre-ish. Now I'm done talking. Look the kid up. I think you'll catch on, or maybe you won't. I'm here for the internet investigators. End quote. The only reason we wanted to add this in is because it's relevant in the fact that it shows how many people knew of him and how he grew up, and also a lot of people know and remember Lisa. It's also been speculated that someone Lisa was super close to murdered Robert B. In fact, according to another source, they go on to say, quote, my thoughts, my personal opinion, the mother and the boyfriend beat him to death, whether on purpose or accidentally. I feel they're responsible, but there is also evidence that we haven't seen, obviously. She's just a very selfish person, end quote. Another source says, quote, Robert B. definitely fits that description. Poor child from a poor family, basically no one talks about it anymore. Just search Robert B., local kid, never stood a chance. Mom is a huge piece of shit. He disappeared. They found his body a year later. No one's ever been charged. End quote.
During a rally in November of 2020 outside of the Pekin Police Department, Stephanie B. states, quote, the Pekin Police Department failed him. A couple of the lead detectives took a higher position and pretty much the case stopped. About 1.5 years, 2 years ago, end quote. About 50 people attended the rally designed to put pressure on the police department to turn the case over to the Illinois police state. Ash Patino, who we mentioned earlier, has essentially been conducting her own investigation of this case. She's come up with some evidence she thinks the police should take a closer look at. Quote, we've given them a ton of information and we feel like they're not being paid attention to. And I think we have some pretty valid leads. So that's why we want the state police to come in and take a good look at it. We're not saying anything is 100% correct, but what we are saying is that some of the stuff we've uncovered needs to be looked into, end quote.
The Pekin Police Public Information Officer Billy Inglis says that the state police have participated in the investigation all along. Quote, the Pekin Police Department Investigations Division contacted the Illinois State Police Zone 4 Investigations Division within days of Robert B. going missing in 2016 and requested assistance with the investigation. ISP Zone 4 Investigations Command and special agents have assisted with numerous facets of the investigations and have continued to assist throughout the investigation. Pekin Investigations Command and Zone 4 Command continue to collaborate on the investigation, which is still ongoing. End quote.
To contact Crime Stoppers, call 309-673-9000. The Pekin Police Department can be reached at 309-346-3132. I want to go on record and say that this case was a ton of work, as we usually research cases solo, but this one was definitely a team effort between myself, Courtney, and also Sonia. Thank you again. I also want to give an extra special shout out to Ryan from the Pub Time podcast for requesting this case. Had it not been for you, we wouldn't have known about this. Another shout out to Erica Bennett for chatting with Courtney about this, and a huge shout out to Ashes to Ash for their 40 plus episodes on this case. If you'd like to know a ton more, we strongly recommend everyone go watch or listen to her show. There are a ton of interviews with the mom, so you'll get the full gist of what we're telling you in this episode.
Robert B., also known as Bonzai, our phoenix, our tree, our battle cry, our one who will regenerate from ashes. Your story will live on, and we want to see that you get justice. Law enforcement failed you, and so did others who should have nurtured you. Instead, they neglected you. You, those who truly cared about you, those who survived after you, are bees. Bees are resilient, strong, yet vulnerable. We must prune, nurture, and also give space to our bonsai, but we must also always protect the bees at all costs. So be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Original intro music by Ghost Stories Incorporated. Remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional music provided by Epidemic Sound. This podcast was researched, scripted, and produced by Amanda Cronin and Courtney Finner. A Nefarious Nightmare is a Cloud 10 iHeart podcast. Managed by A Nefarious Nightmare, Sim Sarna, and Jamie Rice of Murderish and Dirty Money Moves. Thank you again for listening, and be vigilant.